Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. Israel's targeted attack on a gathering of top Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar, as they met to discuss the latest U.S. proposal to negotiate a ceasefire deal that would return Israel's hostages, stunned the world. Among those apparently surprised, U.S. President Donald Trump, whose reaction was less than enthusiastic when reporters asked him about the attack shortly after it took place, as he was standing with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Vice President J.D. Vance, and other White House officials.
So I was very unhappy about it, very unhappy about every aspect, and we got to get the hostages back. But I was very unhappy about the way that went down.
Joining me to discuss the operation, its timing, its nature and implications, and its effect, if any, on the course of the intensifying offensive on Gaza City and the fate of Israel's hostages, is Haaretz senior security analyst Amos Harel. Our conversation is coming up.
Around the world, the fight is on to preserve critical and independent media. Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, upholds its long tradition of accurate, committed, and incisive journalism, refusing to bend its reporting to pressure from any government or leader. A digital subscription to Haaretz gives you up-to-the-minute news and analysis in English from journalists who live Israel's reality and are committed to covering the Middle East and its global repercussions. At the same time, your subscription supports the cause of a free press that holds the powerful to account in Israel and around the world. I invite you to become a subscriber to Haaretz now. Just go to Haaretz.com and use the code Haaretz10, that's Haaretz with the number 10, for 10% off an annual subscription.
Amos Harel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Alison. Thanks for inviting me.
Amos, as we record on Wednesday, we are still not clear who and how many of the Hamas negotiating team targeted in Doha were in fact killed. But that doesn't really change the implications of the attack itself. Since October 7th, Israeli leaders have called any Hamas leader connected to the massacre on that day marked for death, targeting them for assassination over the past 2 years in Gaza, Syria, Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, but not Qatar. This surely is not the first time that this group of Hamas leaders have met to discuss negotiations in Doha. So why did Israel refrain from any such attacks in the past, and why did they make this change right now?
Well, I have to say I don't disagree with the actual decision to strike. I think Hamas leadership is hiding under the guise of a political group, while in fact these are people who are deeply involved in the preparations for the attack and who justified it immediately after that. You remember the joint prayer they held at one of the Qatari hotels in Doha immediately after the massacre on October 7th. And yet there's not much logic to the decision to strike right now if our goal is to bring the hostages back. But I doubt whether this is the real Israeli goal. I think Netanyahu, for quite some time, I think the Prime Minister is mostly interested in his own political survival. He wants an endless war. He doesn't want a hostage deal that would finally end the war and perhaps force him to finally give answers to everything that's on the Israeli public's mind since the fiasco that led to October 7th. And therefore, I think that we should see this as another attempt to prolong the war and to maintain power. This is hard to explain because it works against our basic instincts of assuming that the government is looking for our better collective good or anything like that. But that's not the situation we're in. He's not really concerned with the fate of the hostages. My sense is that Netanyahu gave up on them long ago, perhaps a year ago. And what he's doing right now is about his survival, not about anything else.
From what we know from past experience, and we have now plenty of experience in seeing how assassinating Hamas leaders affects the situation, is this placing Israel's remaining living hostages in greater danger?
So there are two issues here. One is how to fight a terrorist organization. And Israel had some success in the past, and it's not that it's hopeless or unhelpful to assassinate some of these people. If you look back at the Second Intifada, the assassination of Sheikh Yassin in 2004, at the time was criticized in Israeli media, including Haaretz. In the long run, chain of assassinations at that time meant that Hamas was willing to finally reach a ceasefire, which gradually ended the Second Intifada in around 2005. After saying that, I should also note that Hamas is a grassroots movement and that it won't stop fighting Israel just because some of its leaders outside of Gaza are dead. The people in Gaza, the leadership in Gaza, maintains a lot of the control and a lot of the decisions regarding the future of the war. I don't think it will affect them deeply. I don't think it will change negotiations. Again, the public are being told something else than the reality. There are all kinds of fake promises for a quick and swift victory. This is not where we're at. We're much stronger than Hamas. If the IDF finally decides or is given the order to occupy Gaza City, it will happen. And yet, in the long run, it will be problematic because it will be very, very hard to control an area with close to 1 million people, even if some of them are forced out. And Hamas would conduct a guerrilla warfare, which would mean more and more casualties to the IDF. And as I said, it's hard to imagine a final and conclusive victory to this war. And then again, this is not what Netanyahu is after. He's not telling the public the entire truth. He has different goals than what he's presenting to the Israeli people.
And his goals are, aside from political survival?
It's about survival. It's about playing it by ear, improvising, living to see another day in office, staying out of jail. He doesn't think highly of strategy. That's interesting. When you talk to people who are around him all the time, he doesn't talk strategy so much. He thinks that he should keep options open and at the last moment decide what's better for him or what's better for Israel. But it's not about long-term strategic goals so much, except for the two well-known ones. One is preventing Iran from reaching a nuclear bomb. The other is preventing a Palestinian state. But other than that, he's mostly improvising and hoping to stay in power because there are so many personal issues there if he's finally driven out of office.
Amos, we've heard President Donald Trump's remarks about being not thrilled and unhappy with the attack. We've heard reports of his top advisors being stunned and furious. From what you understand and hear, what was the level of information and coordination with the United States? Does it look as if behind the scenes there was some tacit sort of nod of approval from Trump? The United States, even under Biden, has put the brakes on Israeli operations before. Is there a chance that this is some kind of plausible deniability when he says that he's not happy with what happened? Netanyahu did seem to bend over backwards, saying that this was solely an Israeli operation.
So that's exactly the term I was thinking of, plausible deniability. I think it's part of the issue, but it's very hard to tell. First of all, we still don't know what the outcome is. As we speak, Wednesday afternoon in Israel, the details are not clear yet. We tend to assume that this has not been a great success and that most of the people who were targeted actually got out of there alive. We don't know exactly who died, and we don't know exactly what happened between Jerusalem, DC, and Doha while the attack was prepared. Netanyahu and Trump have given conflicting reports, and as usual with the president, it's hard to follow what exactly happened. There's such a fog of lies and half-truths regarding everything that's happening currently. It's a bit too soon to tell. My guess would be that Netanyahu, as he did in the past, waited until very close to the final strike to tell the Americans exactly what was happening. I'm not sure if the Americans had enough time to react. It seems that they're not happy about this, but you should remember, we should keep in mind the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. We haven't seen Trump, unlike his relationships with every other world leader except Putin, we haven't seen Trump ever confronting Netanyahu directly, demanding answers, demanding changes in positions, and so on. Until now, Netanyahu has been quite capable of persuading Trump to avoid such a confrontation. This time, we're close to the edge, I think. I think it's perhaps the president is losing patience. Will that mean that finally Trump would take some action, demand an end to the war, demand that Netanyahu restrain Israeli actions around the I'd almost say around the globe? I'm not sure yet, but this could be, it's not a watershed moment yet, but we're probably getting closer there. I think perhaps after what happened yesterday, maybe the administration or some in the administration are losing their patience with Netanyahu. But then again, it's a bit too soon to tell. We'll have to see how this plays out. I would remind you of the Mashal affair. In 97, Netanyahu, then rather new as prime minister, deciding after an attack in Jerusalem to order an assassination of Mashal, who is still around, by the way, like Netanyahu, in Amman in Jordan. That was, of course, a failed assassination. That led to quite a lot of political and diplomatic price to be paid by the Israelis. It's different right now, but perhaps this may have been a bridge too far. I don't know exactly yet, but I'm sensing that something has happened between DC and Jerusalem, which is different than what has evolved in the last few months.
Amos, where does this leave the Qataris along with the other Gulf states? When you look at their reactions to what happened, do you read something into it? I remind you that we're supposed to be celebrating the 5th anniversary of the Abraham Accords this month. Could we be seeing them fall apart instead, given that Israel is now militarily injected itself into the Gulf region?
So they're probably frustrated and angry, but I'll make the distinction between the Qataris and their neighbors. And most of these guys cannot stand each other. Qatari strategy, Qatari goals are very different than the UAE or the Saudis. Speaking of the Qataris, they played quite a complicated game for a long time. Remember, Netanyahu himself asked about Qatar and saying it's complicated, like a relationship on Facebook or something. This is the way he described what was happening with Qatar. Israel and Qatar, there's a long affair behind the scenes. We all know about the Qatari affair involving at least 3 of Netanyahu's close media advisors.
Qatar
We all know, we all know how suspicious the police are regarding the actions of some of these advisors. A lot of shady things are happening behind the scenes. So the Israeli decision to strike is different than anything before. My heart doesn't bleed for the Qataris for what has happened, and yet the Qataris have a lot of reasons to be angry at the Israelis right now. I don't think much would come out of Qatari efforts to reach a hostage deal, for instance, in the near future. This is not going to happen. As for their neighbors, they're not weeping because Qatar has been put in such a miserable situation and has been embarrassed. Yet what they are afraid of is what this could do, perhaps even to tourism in the Gulf, because in the end, for a long time, what they've achieved, the different countries of the region of the Gulf, what they've achieved is a sort of a no-go zone for military and terrorist actions. Israel did not strike in that region, neither did the Iranians, except for that symbolic attack during the war with Israel, where they shot some missiles towards the American base in Qatar. Other than that, the Gulf states were safe. Now, if Hamas or even Iran wants revenge, what about all of those Israeli tourists in the UAE? This could be open season on Israeli targets in that region, and that could also mean problems for the hosts, especially for the government in the UAE. So I think everybody in the region is quite scared of these implications, and I'm not sure that Israel thought this through before making this fateful decision to strike.
Do you think this is going to take Qatar out of the picture as a mediator? Will they no longer be interested in playing the role that they have pushed themselves so hard to be playing, undermining the Egyptian role and becoming sort of the main crux of the negotiations to presumably end the Gaza war?
Again, perhaps I'll disappoint you, but I think it's too soon to tell. I don't know exactly. The sentiment is quite clear. They're angry at Israel for doing this. They didn't want this to happen. It embarrassed them. And it's problematic for the future relationship with Qatar, with Hamas, with Israel, with their neighbors, and so on. Will they, in fact, decide that they're not involved in negotiations anymore? It's a bit too early, but I think we'll soon find out. I don't see a lot of hope right now for the hostages and for the hostage deal. Perhaps if things could get even worse, then somebody, meaning mostly President Trump, would have to act in order to correct this and finally put an end to this war, which is by now senseless in my view. But we'll have to wait and see. We haven't seen enough reaction to show where this is heading. My guess for a long time is that only Trump is capable of solving this. And Trump has a lot on his plate. We've seen Witkoff dealing with so many different arenas, whether it's Israel-Iran, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Ukraine and Russia. We haven't seen a lot of success from the administration's point of view recently. And I should also keep mentioning one important deadline, which is, I think, October 10th. At that day, there should be an announcement about who wins the Nobel Peace Prize for this year. And for the time being, Trump is running. He's one of the candidates, but he has not won this yet. And he doesn't have a lot to show for his efforts. He can claim victory over Azerbaijan and Armenia, or a success over India and Pakistan, although apparently Modi thinks otherwise. But what can he offer which would allow him to actually receive the prize and finally get what Obama's gotten, 16 or 17 years ago? This didn't happen yet. And if it's that crucial to Trump, maybe finally there would be enough pressure on Netanyahu to at least compromise a little.
You'll probably also say that it's too early to tell, but do you see this making the Hamas leadership, again, given that we don't know who was killed and who wasn't, but do you think in general it would push them to be more or less inclined to a deal, presuming one is still on the table?
First of all, we have to define Hamas. What exactly is Hamas? What we know is that for years and years, they've been talking of a sort of a joint leadership. It was never one leader. We're fond of talking, especially about Arab leaders, as if they are the country or the state or the organization. That's not the case with Hamas. With Hamas, you have different poles having a different kind of influence and a sort of a very complicated system of joint decisions. And that includes the prisoners in Israeli jails, the West Bank leadership, the Gaza leadership, and the outside leadership, which is currently in Qatar. So we don't know exactly what the balance of power is, and we don't know exactly who died there. But some of the explanations I've heard yesterday on Israeli TV were quite simplistic. If we take out the Hamas leadership in Qatar, which evidently now we know didn't exactly happen, then these guys were more hawkish, and then the others would become more flexible, and finally we'll get a deal. When you talk about the others, you're talking of a guy named, most Israelis haven't heard his name. His name is Izzadin al-Haddad, and he's the current leader of Hamas in Gaza. And he's the fourth leader in a row because the last three were eliminated by Israel during the war, both the brothers Sinwar and Mohammed Deif. This is a guy who's very religious, who spent almost 2 years hiding in a tunnel, who's seen destruction all around him or above him in Gaza. Is he the guy to finally become flexible and sign a compromise with Israel? I'm not so sure. And on top of everything else, as we know, it's Israel more than Hamas that recently turned down all kinds of American suggestions to reach a final deal. So how effective would that be? Again, I doubt whether this would lead to a major change in Hamas. I think what Hamas would do, as it always does, is sit back and wait and see how dangerous the situation is for Israel, what it brought on Israel, what decision-making would look like on the Israeli side. If they see somewhere where they could apply pressure, then they would continue. If there's an opening for them for a final deal, they'll probably go for it. But there's no deal yet. There are all kinds of suggestions on the table. The last deal was not serious. The one suggested last week by the Americans, this is, again, Netanyahu disguising himself as Trump and actually trying to push Trump in a direction which is not something that the Hamas leadership can live with. And that's where we're stuck right now. And on top of everything else is growing fighting in Gaza. The situation is escalating, and the danger for the hostages is even worse than before. And remember, last week what we saw were videos. We were concerned about the horrific conditions in which the hostages are held. But what was also important was the fact that at least 2 of them were seen moved around Gaza. They were actually moved to Gaza City, meaning that Hamas was threatening Israel. If you guys go in Gaza, you're about to kill more of your own. This is the subtle message there. And that's what's frightening. And then when you hear people like Einav Tsangalko, Matan's mother, speaking, you can hear the panic in their voices even more than before, because this is such a horrific situation for the hostages. I don't know how longer they can stand it psychologically. I don't know. They are starved. That's quite clear from the videos. And it's also dangerous. There's the direct and immediate danger of getting killed by an Israeli bomb. It could happen because Israel does not know exactly where the hostages are held. Presumably they're on the ground. Presumably they're relatively safe because this is what Hamas wants. But then again, accidents could happen, have happened in the past. And if indeed we did kill somebody important in Doha, there could be retaliation soon. I hope it doesn't get to anybody torturing or killing hostages. In the end, live hostages are an asset to Hamas. But there's a danger there. We're playing with fire. The decision to keep striking at Hamas leadership and the decision to strike at Qatar is I'd almost say it's a clear and present danger for the lives of the Israeli hostages.
And on that worrisome and grim note, Amos Harel, Haaretz senior security analyst, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your thoughts. And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Amos Harel, and to producer and editor Nara Malkin. If you'd like to continue to listen to the podcast, make sure you never miss an episode. Please subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are so inclined, leave us a 5-star rating so more people can find us. And to keep up with all the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.